was solid, yes. We are back and feeling better than yesterday. You had a huge headache last time. And I was starting to get achy, and this morning I got up to 100. But,
Tylenol and rest broke it.
death fever. So now I'm feeling better, and that means the vaccines worked.
Yeah, I still feel a little wonky, but...
Yeah, definitely better than before.
Yeah.
So, alright, so hopefully we can use that rejuvenation to figure this out. I still can't quite believe what just happened. I know, I inquired with the bailiff after the court session was adjourned, and it seems Mr. Vigil was taken to the hospital to recover. Right. 10 years ago now, Mr. Vigil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the prison governor's office. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of those events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret, not his family, not even the man himself. But I forced it out into the open. Was it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder? Runo! Oh, Iris. You were miles away. Anyway, I've brewed a fresh pot of soothing tea for you. Oh, thank you. You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Oh. Thank you, Iris. How thoughtful of you. Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back into the defendant's antechamber, he disappeared. Oh no, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, I must leave. I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Gregson's death. Well, you know what Hurley's always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. For the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else. What does that mean? He knows very well that when you open someone else's old wounds, you often open your own too. But he can't just take his own advice and leave well alone. Solving mysteries is too important to him. That's so true. But that's what I like about Hurley, after all. I suppose that's the lot of a great detective in some ways. So then, let's have tea, and then I'll give you a hand. Oh, do you have time, Iris? Yes, I finished this month's manuscript at last, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. A brand new story to read in the adventures of Sherlock Sholmes. You know, I always hide Hurley's violin in the days before I have a deadline. You do? Poor Mr. Sholmes. I'm sure that's very wise, Iris. How sensible of you. Now then, my dear fellows, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. What to do? Let's see. Well, let's go systematically here. So, how did it go in court this morning? Well, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing's increasingly clear. Lord Von Zieks definitely didn't do it. Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh, really? And there was another development too, Kazuma. Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma-sama is not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he's possessed. I know. I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, he was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Mr. Vigil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent.
What if he's channeling his dad?
What's going on in his head, I wonder? And the thing is like, so far, these two games have actually been more grounded.
Yeah, there's no supernatural.
Yeah, no supernatural, no Cyclops, no person taking over the body of, current person, so we haven't seen that, and that's why so far I don't know if there's actually a kind of possession going on, or if it's something else. I really need to sit down with Kazuma and try to understand what he's going through. If Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered, then Lord Von Zieks has to be innocent, you see. What, the day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out just by examining the corpse, surely. Yes, you would expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included in the autopsy report. That is curious. There are still unanswered questions about Lord Von Zieks, though, aren't there? Do you mean... what was he doing on Fresno Street that day in the first place? Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Inspector Gregson, didn't he? And it turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office. Ooh, that sounds like it has all the makings of a wonderfully devilish plot. Then why was that notice board in there covered in all those particular papers? And those were the Reaper victims. Papers about cases with a link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this. Oh dear, that sounds more like something horribly devilish. We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late. I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movements. Well, according to the entry in his diary, he was carrying out an incognito investigation of the Red-Headed League the day before his death. Oh, you mean he was doing the same as Hurley? Well, Mr. Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to be investigating. I do wish it had been the other way around. Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the Red-Headed League that day wasn't actually Gregson at all. It was Mr. Vigil in possession of Gregson's identification. You know what that sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi. Oh my, yes, you're absolutely right, Iris. But why would Gregson need an alibi? Though it appeared that the inspector had something to do that he wished to keep secret. I don't believe it. I always thought he was just a harmless lover of fish and chips. But perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar. I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies. Well, anyway, if Lord Von Zieks felt the need to investigate Gregson... Yes, I agree, we must try to find out what he knows. Vigil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit Hurley yesterday? That's right, to ask Mr. Sholmes if he would help her to find her missing husband. Only Mr. Sholmes completely passed the buck to us. Actually, didn't you say that Mr. Vigil had been taken to the hospital? Do you know which one? Ah, it's St. Sinners. I'm starting to wonder if all the other hospitals in London have closed down. But that's amazing, Runo. You found the lady's husband already. Well, I suppose I have, by accident. And 10 years ago, while Mr. Vigil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for overseeing the professor's incarceration. No. So when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed. Sometimes I really don't want to grow up. There's more, for 10 years after that, while he was ostensibly working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be his stand-in to impersonate the inspector. To impersonate Gregsy? But why? I have absolutely no idea. Ginny was right. I'm starting to think all adults are up to no good now. Including you, Runo. I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me. That means he has ties to the professor and to Inspector Gregson, though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Mr. Vigil, don't you? Back to St. Sinners, then. Well, I think it's clear what we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows. Oh, Iris, you're even more enthusiastic than usual today. If If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will soon set them straight. That water pistol? It's stuffed full of a piping hot extra special blend of mine. Then I'm quite sure it will be very effective. I better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it feels a little strange that Mr. Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still, let's go and see what we can find out. Yes. Okay. We can go to Lord Strongheart. We can go to the prison. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, the hospital bed.
Okay.
Maybe he's in the other bed.
Okay, we'll come back. Maybe we can see Von Zieks in the prison. You do?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I don't know.
He doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he? But he must have noticed that we're here, surely. What do you Nipponese want? Wow! That's no way to greet the lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it? Perhaps not. Hmm? I apologize. So, what can I do for you, Mr. Naruhodo? Lord Von Zieks, speaking earnestly. Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow. This does feel very, very strange. I must say I was impressed. Oh, well, thank you. Not by you, by your fellow Nipponese, your prosecutor friend. Oh, I see, yes. It's sardonic, don't you think? Is to be entirely at the mercy of the two of you. For having played the part of the Reaper all these years. Played the part. Let's see, whoops. Reaper's identity, Prosecutor Asogi. You once told me that you gladly allowed people to believe you're the Reaper, because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place in London. If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I myself am committed to pursuing, then why would I choose to say anything? Because the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day. And that was just the most recent of many attempts on your life, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you. Believe me, ever since the Reaper first appeared, I've been doing my utmost to expose him. Or rather, exponization. Ah, it's a whole lot. He was the tactician. His job was to covertly investigate the marks and plot their assassinations. In order to do that without arousing suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi, which is where Mr. Vigil came in, posing as the inspector. Vigil knows nothing of the Reaper, but the room he rents on Fresno Street was almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassin there for briefings, so we don't actually know who carried out the killings then. Actually, I do have a name. What? You what? Well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then. Or, if I can name the woman.
Uh-oh.
Oh? She's a young woman by the name of Asa Shin. That's new. Shin?
Oh, maybe that was her.
The true name of a terrifying killer I know only too well. Really? That was her name?
Well, it was Giselle Brett, but remember she was a double agent?
Oh, yeah.
But she did.
She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Dr. John H. Wilson. Then, just when it seemed that diplomatic protection would help her escape Japan and conviction, the mysterious woman was herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper of the Bailey. Mr. Naruhodo, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss. No, of course not. We can't mention it here. The fact that she killed Dr. John H. Wilson. Because Iris doesn't know, and it's very likely that the man was her father. Asashin. I should let father know at once.
She worked under her dad.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the Reaper stuff stopped.
Mm-hmm. Someone else is still carrying it out.
Are they? Because, even though McGilded died, that seemed different, but you had Natsumi who didn't die, Gina who didn't die. I feel like she was on the other side of the world, and so you weren't seeing the Reaper, basically.
But that's true, but he said people who are truly innocent, that,
And that's true. And even though he knows this, he tried to get his friend passage out of the country, so he can't think that...
Does he know Giselle Brett's dead, though?
I don't know. Let's see. Yes, I agree. That's an interesting...
We knew some way it would have to come back to her.
Yeah, because she was still... No. Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Sogi. You say he's a friend of yours. My best friend. He's the whole reason I got to come to Britain. It was all on his merits. I have nothing but respect for him. Yes, I understand that only the very best students are selected for such opportunities, and I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father, Genshin Isoki, the professor. It's true that the aristocracy at the time was the root of numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing their power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics and economics and war. In many ways, Isogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves. Ah, I see. But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint von Zieks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. Why did that damn Nipponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine. He saved your life? How did that happen?
Interesting.
It was 10 years ago on a foggy night. What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic to the capital. So Clint von Zieks had already been killed at this point then. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point, I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us. We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. The scum of London hated the sight of him, and they had no sympathy for his younger brother either. I'd been targeted several times before already. Yeah, it's von Zieks, alright, we got him. I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me. But just when I thought my time had come, if I let them kill you, Clint would never forgive me. It was Sogi's voice, just a whisper in my ear. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. 2 days later, they arrested him. On suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever, the Professor. How awful for you. All at once, I lost the brother I revered and the foreign friend I held in such high regard. I'm so sorry, Lord von Zieks. That's the end of my miserable tale. I never thought I'd recount it to anyone. Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimately related they all are. I still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper. Giving assassination orders to Giselle Brett? Mr. Naruhodo, let's go and inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information. Oh, that means I get to meet your daddy, Susie. Hooray! Yes, alright. Let's get back to the Great Waterloo Hotel then. Oh, that was kind of shocking.
Well, I'm wondering if his brother's actually a shithead. Sorry. A bad person. I wonder if his brother is a bad person.
That's the thing, like...
He killed him because he wasn't. Okay.
Like, something like that, and maybe the Professor isn't actually a
Bad
big
guy.
serial killer. Or, maybe to put more specifically, maybe Genshin is not the actual Professor.
Yeah, like they just... If Scotland Yard investigated, they could have just made stuff up. Because I'm sorry, because they have Courtney Scythe on their side too.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know how much stuff she
Yeah, we don't.
falsified.
And it seemed like Vigil helped the Professor escape. And we still don't know who shot him when he supposedly came back to life.
Yeah.
Okay, Great Waterloo.
But we don't want them talking about Dr. Henry to Iris.
That's right. You don't want, you said Dr. Henry?
Hey, Wilson.
John H. Wilson.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought it yesterday, and I think it again today. This place is so princely. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same tomorrow, too. My tea has a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the tea room here, though, wouldn't you say? Ah, look who we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure. Ah, Father. Ooh, is this your daddy, Susie? How lovely. What a charming young lady. And you are?
Oh god, he's gonna know.
Ah, really? So you're the author of The Adventure of Herlock Sholmes, are you? That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. Iris, do you know your dad is dead? Oops, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Susie's been such a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know. Well, Miss Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly and with much interest. Iris actually lives with Mr. Sholmes, you know, Father. Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explain that bright look in your eyes. Hee hee. You wouldn't be smiling so early if you knew just how bright she is, believe me. Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance. Oh, well, thank you very much. Although I'm fairly sure you admitted by Kazuma at the end there. No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me. Yeah, something about Mikotoba. Both of them. They can read the mind. Really? You didn't miss a step against Asogi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary. It's very kind of you to say so, and really nice to hear. What I saw in court today confirmed what I'd been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo, I trust you haven't forgotten. Oh no, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, Father. Of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters further? I wonder where Judge Jigoku has got to. That's actually the first thing I want to ask. Whoops.
I think your vaccine and fever has affected your driving skills of the controller.
Possibly.
Do you feel better, Fish?
I mean, definitely compared to this morning. Holy smokes. I wouldn't have been able to play this right now if I was still feeling the same way. I haven't seen Judge Jigoku for a while, have you? Guilty! Ha 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 ha. but that guilty is still ringing in my ears. No, now you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore at the Great Exhibition. That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jigotu having once been in the dock himself? Ah yes, it was all tied up with that accursed trial. The closed trial of Kazuma's father. See, Shiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and actually managed to break the witness stand. Oh my. He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged. Oh dear, although it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that. Well, it was all alright in the end. He was acquitted and we returned home to Japan together. Thank goodness. Ah yes, talking of Shiro, I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here yesterday, please. Oh, what a lovely picture.
He's a big man.
He is. It certainly seems to show we've arrived in Britain. Is he sweating, Naruhodo? Or is that just a crease in the picture?
I don't know.
None of us have any idea what was coming when we took that, did we? Looks like it's sweat. Yeah, he's big, but you could tell he was big when he gave that takedown to the reporter dude.
Hey, he's a big guy.
Yeah, he is. And he is way thinner than he looks when
He has that,
yeah.
I don't want to call it a kimono, but that
But I
certain
think,
garb on.
yeah, I feel like it's a distinctly Japanese garb, maybe?
Yeah. But they have fitted nice suits on here.
Yeah. And so he's actually not a very huge dude, Mikotoba. And what's the description? Photograph taken in the foyer of the Great Waterloo Hotel on the morning of Professor Mikotoba and Judge Jigoku's arrival in London for the symposium. No, that's so true. Alpha Reaper. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey? I've heard rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was a visiting student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge. Right, he didn't appear until after that case when the visiting students had already returned home. Lord von Zieks, who was in the dock today, that was Baroque, the younger brother of Clint von Zieks, I believe. That's right, and he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard, but the truth is, it wasn't him behind all those mysterious deaths, it was somebody else. I see. So what you're saying is there's been a professional killer at work here. Exactly, someone by the name of Asa Shin, in fact. I beg your pardon? Did you say Asa Shin? You mean that Giselle Brett woman who was responsible for killing my great friend? I know a friend of yours was killed. Professor Mikotoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. Because the friend the professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. That's not something we want Iris to find out about, not like this anyway. I've just remembered something. Biscuits. This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits. That was rather out of the blue, too, Iris. Oh yes. You just try to leave me behind. So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she? Yes, that's right. And she's the author of all those adventure stories starring the great Detective Sholmes. The name of the credited author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson. Yes, I know, that's the name of her father, you see. Her father... Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all the kindness he showed me during my time in London. Brett. Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about that case, but it seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father. Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. but I think I can say with some certainty that Kana and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure. That's what we thought, yes. We're back with cinnamon biscuits. Oh, they smell delicious, Iris. Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. Oh, we were only doing mic audio. Something happened. Poor connection quality, broadcasting only mic audio. At least that hasn't changed. So you mentioned a favor that you'd like to ask me. Well, this fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another it'll be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan. You want me to do what? Father, what's the meaning of this? Now, Susato, you should understand, you've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense. Oh, you mean the Supreme Court of Judicature is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible, really quite urgently, in fact. But I've not even been in London a year yet. I've heard all of Susato's reports and well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question you, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs. So, you'd be leaving then, Runo. But then what am I supposed to do, Father? You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant. Oh yeah, she's supposed to be Kazuma's assistant. Our government is still in the process of deciding how to best deal with his situation, though. You've always chosen your own path, Susato, and I trust your judgment, in this matter also. Father, please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand, a hope if I'm honest, but I won't force you. All I ask is that you consider it and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes. Yes, alright. You won't leave, will you, Runo? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Kazuma's will, but it turns out that he's still alive, so where does that leave me? Well, if you'll excuse me now, I need to telegram government ministers about the Japanese police with this information about Asa Shin. Of course, Father, thank you. I look forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson. Oh good, and please do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you. I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you? Yes, I will. Going back home. You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this. Yes, no doubt. Asa Shin. Of course, it's so obvious. How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Ah, Mr. Sholmes. Hurley, where have you been? Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question. I didn't notice you at all. No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It is a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I entrust the task? Quickly now, who? Ah, well... My father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself. I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow. I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes. There's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask your trusty unshaven father to see this ascent. I will, but what is it? No questions at this time, if you please, Miss Susato. All we can do is pray. that for once, my deduction is awry. Doesn't that imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Sholmes? Which isn't exactly... Now then. You may be surprised to learn that I am a very busy man. I surely have no time to hide behind settees and eavesdrop on other people's conversations. So that's what joining us for tea meant. I leave the sending of this in your hands, my dear fellows. Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Sholmes. He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace. And left the unpaid bill for his tea behind, too.
Turd.
I must catch up with Father at the telegraph office at once. And I'll run and call us a cab straight away. And there was me, thinking everyone would be clamoring to pay Mr. Sholmes' bill. Let's see. Let's see if Vigil's here. Now, hold up a sec. It's still saying poor connection quality. Well, this is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Ah, the lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm so sorry to have caused you to. I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you've obviously tried to forget... The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him. Oh, Cosmo beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself. Please don't think like that. Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as a stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help. So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along, then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but it wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it's true. Oh, Mr. Vigil. I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but, if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened? I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Alright. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. Details of the Reaper's marks, yes. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him. You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf. Oh no, never. A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident. Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters. Yes, so you would always make a point of showing Gregson identification and generally being loud. That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. That's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however. We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector, but at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. It was at midnight on the 17th of June 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dared to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole, something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, right? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned victim, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had the confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut. No. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So you mean the coffin contained... Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long, so in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free. But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder. I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me. Obviously you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi. Yes, I remember him well, in fact. Would you mind telling us what you know? Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity. The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience. What do you mean exactly? He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life, yes. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something. Something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. Ah, his last will and testament then, presumably. As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really, he was allowed his things. That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy, but at the time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials, specifically no pens or paper. So he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him. Yes, that was the long and short of it. I have no idea where he obtained the paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back? Please turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline. But you know it's against the rules. You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet... Alright then, but what's on that paper? My last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. How can a will be a weapon? So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without trace. What? What do you mean it vanished? It would seem this isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will. I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Asogi's execution, which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama. And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects. The will, I mean. That's right, though I didn't search through them myself. Governor Caden was livid. He was screaming, "Can A have disappeared completely?" That doesn't quite make sense, though, does it? In what way? Well, we'd understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it? Oh yes, you're right. I really don't know how he knew, but it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Well, he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was... the Asogi Papers. The Asogi Papers? I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal and the way you blocked it all from your memory. I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but... No, not at all. Thank you again. But what would become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. I'm so sorry. Don't be, please. This was all my doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. Whoops. Sorry. I think you're right about my motor skills after the booster. So, what it seems like is that somebody... Before you go, there's just one thing. So what it seems like is that somebody put him in the coffin alive and Genshin wanted to be in there alive. That way somebody could dig him up and he would get out.
Yeah.
But then somebody shot him dead anyway.
Somebody knew about it.
Oh, yes? What is it? The Asogi Papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them. Presumably for some good reason. It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about the document that Kazuma's father left behind, it would be Mr. Vigil's governor. Then we know precisely where we must go, back to Barclay Prison.
We'll leave a note at the end of his bed.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same note as it normally is, but...
But do not feed the other girl.
These must be patient treatment notes. Tendency to jump from windows, remember to place cushion at base of wall outside. What?!
Not nice.
Aren't we a story up from the ground here? Oh dear, poor Mr. Vigil. I can't help feeling that there's a better solution to the problem than a cushion, though. Finding something you'd lost isn't always a happy experience, it turns out. Pursuing the truth can be a very dark business sometimes, can't it? So wait, what did it say for Olive?
Do not feed.
Oh my god. All this is mean. All their notes are so mean. Ooh, it's back again, are you? Yes, hello. I've heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You found him, eh? Vigil. Yes, luckily. Well, anyhow, the laddie doesn't work here no more, so your case is not to do with Barclay. I wouldn't like you to get the wrong idea about that. Of course, yes, Mr. Vigil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so... Yes, we've seen his dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the chop. Aye, Kimmer, you can very well. So how about a wee handcuff biscuit? Oh, they really are like little handcuffs, and as hard as irons, too. So what brought you down here the day? Well, there's something else we'd like to ask you about, actually. Is that so? We believe there might have been a document that disappeared from Genshin Asogi's cell. I think it's been called the Asogi Papers or something. Did I no say? Gregson's death is now to do with things that might have happened at Barclay. Leave the past in the past, laddie. Let's not futter about with irrelevant details. His expression changed completely. We're clearly onto something here. That murderer's box execution and the whole miserable escape. They were Barclay's darkest hour, aye, a shocking embarrassment. Because the convict had a collaborator on the prison staff, you mean? Aye, for shame. The coroner who confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Scythe. And my chief warder at the time, Vigil, who was in charge of the whole affair. But Mr. Vigil says he didn't know anything about it. The rascal wouldn't say otherwise, eh? More handcuffs? Oh, how could I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet. But Mr. Vigil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what had happened. He was so despairing he jumped out of your office window, didn't he? I didn't like to stay, but that's just Vigil trying to get out of it. Do you know thing he wouldn't have jumped from the shock of his crimes being exposed, eh? I do. You wouldn't say otherwise, though, would you? Of course, I can shun all responsibility myself. I shouldn't have let him deceive me. Actually, there's barely anybody that kens what went on at the time now. With Gregson having been murdered and Dr. Scythe forbidden from having any visitors. No visitors. Someone obviously doesn't want her giving anything away. Well, we're not going home empty-handed. And I would nae dream of sending your packing wood now. Kimmer, here, take a handcuff or two. Oh, well, it would be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic. I suppose if there's anybody who might still ken about what happened back then, it'd be that lass from the forensic division, Maria Gori. Maria Gori. Aye, Scythe's daughter. She didnae have no more, just the one. But the wee bairns followed in her mam's footsteps. You didnae ever see her without a scalpel in her hand. Ah.
Or a mask on.
Yeah. Mama, what is this? Ah, where did she spring from? And did she just call the doctor Mama?
How old would her daughter be?
I don't know, because she's not that old.
No.
Dr. Scythe's daughter, Maria Gori. We could do with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Scythe's daughter, but her surname is Gori. Aye, there's some family history, I'm sure, but I didnae ken the ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mam working with the bodies of the folk who died in strange circumstances, and decided to do the same with her own life. I understand it myself.
And she signed the death certificate on,
Gregson?
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps she was driven by a deep respect for her mother. Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right, and the coroner responsible for this incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mam's stories about cutting up bodies. There's even a rumor that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby. Well then, perhaps her mother might have told her about the autopsy from the case 10 years ago. I'd say there's a fighting chance at least. After all, that was a life-changing case for all of us. We really need to speak to Miss Gori herself about this, I think. Well, thank you very much. I'm no happy about any part of this. It took years for Lenners to finally forget the whole professor business. Can you no give up on this, laddie? Just stop asking pointless questions. I'm sorry, I don't like dredging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you no just stay away, no? Leave me alone and didn't come back here, eh? And yep, we're gonna ask him about the Asogi papers. How do you come to ken about that, laddie? There's no many folks even here in the prison who've heard of those papers. Ah, well, I can't tell him, Mr. Vigil told me. I'm afraid our sources must remain confidential, sir. We've been led to believe the papers are actually a last will and testament, is that right? The professors were rather Genshin Asogis. Aye, that's right. You're well informed, Jimmy. Oh, is that the end of the silent treatment? But then, after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? Havers, no. You're off at half-cocked there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in the cell exactly where it should have been. Oh. Now what we heard elsewhere. Let me just have a wee hawk around in here. I'm sure I can find it. Aye, here you are. See? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I cannae read a word of those Japanese squiggles, but I mind it says he leaves all his worldly possessions to his son back in his homeland. Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it. So these are the Asogi papers. Aye, of course they are. Papers written by Asogi, no doubt about it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's your lot. After all the stramash, or that slayster of an execution, we sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, and that was the end of it. I think we ought to make a record of this, Mr. Naruhodo, just in case. One thing before you go your way, Mr. Naruhodo. I, Genshin Asogi, hereby request that upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son, Kazuma Asogi, in the Empire of Japan. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land, and the knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again, but I regain nothing about my chosen path. Oh, yes? Those papers are now to do with Gregson's death. I prefer if you did make no mention of them outside this office, or rather, I would just prefer it, considering an order from the highest levels of our government. I understand. Interesting. I wonder if I'm supposed to show him something. Oh, would you rather have a wee handcuff biscuit? Do we know any of them? No.
Why do you think you need to show him something?
I don't know, we've only gotten 3 things out of him.
I got quite a bit from him.
Let's take a look at the Fresno Street room. Maybe we gotta do more investigation. Now it seems like it's the same stuff here. No arguments, Prosecutor Asogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly. It's Kazuma-sama. Defying Lord Strongheart by the sound of it. He never did know when to back down. On your way now, Asogi. My lord. Kazuma. He left without saying a word. Yes, what are you doing here? Well, I was just hoping to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. I wanted Von Zieg's trial concluded today. Prosecutor Asogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary. Unwelcome inquiries? As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds. 42, 43... Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed, Mr. Naruhodo. In a miraculous not even 5 minutes? Anyway, I can't let the man's obvious bad mood put me off. I need information. Okay, let's do closed trial first. This country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years. So the last one was the Professor's, the trial of Genshin Asogi. Correct. Actually, we heard that originally. You're going to prosecute the trial yourself, Lord Strongheart. Von Zieg entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And here we are 10 years later, with the son of the man Von Zieg has condemned now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way. They do say that what goes around comes around. However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well.
I'm not answering that.
Kazuma is? I like my organization to run smoothly in the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others. Ah, so that's what all these gears are about in here. If the young man refuses to mesh with the other parts of my great machine, I will be forced to take steps. What do you mean? Not something with which you need to concern yourself. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. Does Prosecutor Asogi believe that Lord Von Zieks is the Reaper? I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago in that fateful closed trial that Lord Von Zieks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. And when the ringleader of a criminal organization was acquitted, thanks to all the jurors being under duress. But that's awful. The man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days. Yes, let me see. He died in the rock slide at his place of work, I believe. Correct. That was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Bailey. And people believed Lord Von Zieks was responsible. He was brought to trial himself, but it was shown to have been an accident. So he must have had a sound alibi then. Nevertheless, the mysterious deaths continued. A total of 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, ostensibly at the hand of the Reaper. That's a long run of coincidences. Well, the Reaper's true identity may well be revealed by this trial. And the impact that revelation would have on the British public cannot be understated. Is that why it's a closed trial? Precisely. Now, I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As of this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours. Oh my, that is a long time. And I hold you entirely responsible. Even though we miraculously managed to fit everything into not even 5 minutes? I wonder if you might agree to us talking with Prosecutor Asogi. Discussions between the defense and the prosecution outside of the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go, you can find him in his office. Oh, thank you. Let's go to see him at once, Mr. Naruhodo. Kazuma's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not all that sure I know how to talk to him at the moment. So, this is the office of Prosecutor Asogi now, is it? Kazuma-sama is doing so well for himself. Even though he's always forced to kneel on the floor Japanese style in that dark corner, it's his habit to sit Caesar style wherever he's working. Or whenever he's working. Kazuma. I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Rinosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry. That you have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. While I always believed that you'd fulfill your dreams of advocating in the British courts, I just never imagined for 1 second that it would be as a prosecutor. Seeing you stand in a foreign courtroom so gallantly realizing your dream, Kazuma-sama, I'm truly happy for you. And I'm truly thankful to you, Judicial Assistant Mikotoba. Rinosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisaged it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I've learned a lot of things during my time in London, about how Susato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Jigoku, and about what happened to your father, then you'll have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Rinosuke Naruhodo. Let's see. What would you like? Your head hurts again? Alright. So
How far did we play?
we've gotten an hour, 12 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So not bad. Okay, so we'll continue with Kazuma later then? Okay.
Sorry, I think it's my shot.
I mean, we both have been feeling weird. I had to sleep this morning, so I get it.
By the way, I'll keep my eye open.
Yeah, you haven't been sleeping.
I was waiting for it to get to be continued spot, but
There's been a lot of stuff we've had to discover in this investigation. We haven't even investigated the Gregson thing, really. We've just been talking about the Reaper and the Professor. So
I was wondering if, like, the judge and the professor, like, switched places or something. Like, the judge was really doing the bad stuff and, like, blamed it on Asogi. And, like, now I'm starting, because, like, it's also weird that when Courtney Scythe did the autopsy, she was Courtney Stevens, but she's had a daughter that's old enough to do autopsies now, but she would have been, I guess, born even then. How old is Courtney Stevens? Like 39?
I mean, that's the thing.
Because if she was like 19 or 20 when she had the daughter, is she not on there anymore?
Not for now, no. So you're talking about this judge?
Yeah. Because he would be like 4 years older than Scythe. Scythe's 39. So if she has a daughter, she had a daughter like when she was 18 or 19. Her daughter would just be that age now, doing the autopsies. But part of me wonders if, like, she has a daughter with one of them.
I do wonder, like, I've been kind of curious about him ever since he gave a takedown to the reporter.
Yeah, I think something's going on with him. And then, like, I mean, Courtney Scythe would participate if it was the father of her child, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. Because remember, he said Stevens was her maiden name, but this kid would already have had to be born. Because they said, well, how did she get the last name Gory? And they're like, oh, it's a family name.
Yeah, I don't know. But I have wondered about him, because A, he's here doing stuff that we don't know about, which seems strange.
And he's on some kind of legal board, and he's an ambassador or whatever.
And he's huge, which is always a little creepy.
Him being huge has like...
Oh, I think so. He's scarier that way.
He's scary.
One thing I found out, Jigoku actually means something in Japanese, which is why I'm also suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Devil.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah,
Why'd you look that up?
I didn't look it up.
How'd you find it out?
I saw somebody going, God, I mean, I feel like they wouldn't give him that name for no reason, right? And I'm like, I didn't know that's what it meant,
what I'm
but...
saying is maybe he's actually the killer and he pinned it on...
Genshin Asogi.
Yeah, and someone actually believed him that he didn't do it. It was going to help him to escape,
But he shot him.
Yeah. But Courtney Scythe is in on it, but we don't know why.
Yeah. Well...
But if she had a relationship with him, then that would make sense.
I've probably in the past playthrough or two thought maybe he's the one who shot him. But that would completely be different than what I thought cases ago when I thought Strongheart could be the Reaper.
Well, that is also a possibility because the gun that's left on the floor there is one that's issued to the prosecutors. But they said this one is so old it wasn't assigned a number. which male Strongheart would have been a prosecutor at that time. That he would have been issued one.
That's true.
There's a lot going on. I'm quite intrigued,
Yeah.
but I started to get suspicious of him, like you said, when he did the takedown to the reporter.
Yeah, right at that moment, and then he's like, oh yeah, I knew it was a woman, but I let her anyway, which, you know, probably would seem more benevolent if he hadn't just take down the reporter who, while a murderer, did it because basically he was trying to be a little reaper of his own.
Yeah, so I'm kind of confused. And then the daughter thing that Scythe has, she would have been very young when she had her. She would have been unmarried because she was Stevens when she did the autopsy.
I also think it's actually ironic, come to think of it, now that we just talked about that Giselle Brett was the Reaper, apparently,
Yeah.
from what we understand. But the guy who killed her was basically a Reaper himself. Oh, she's getting away with it, I'm going to do the honors.
Yeah.
But then why did she kill Wilson?
She's an assassin, like a double, because she speaks both English and Japanese.
Well, I know she's an assassin, apparently, but I'm wondering why. What did he do? What was his involvement in the whole thing?
And it's also kind of weird because he's saying, Mikotoba, the dad, is saying that if this Wilson is the same Wilson he knew, he never worked alongside Sholmes.
Sholmes, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that we still have to find out, because we're basically like a case and a half until the end of the game.
Yeah.
And this is going to wrap up basically everything that started in the first game. I was honestly worried that first game, how they were going to figure everything out, but I've actually been pretty impressed with how everything's been coming together over the course of the two games.
How old is Daly?
40. Seems younger.
Yeah.
Like, I thought she was older than 36.
Me too.
And I thought he was younger than 40. 51, that seems about right. Gregson will never have another birthday.
If he's really dead and Gory didn't fictitiously sign something.
Oh, wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah, but who knows? Because you can't trust anybody.
Yeah, you don't seem to trust anybody, and I never would have thought he'd be a murder victim.
And her mom and her would know about the scalpels. Because the daughter would know that they weren't using that many scalpels. Because they're paying somebody to not out their secret. And who did we figure out that they're paying? I already forgot. Not Enoch Trevor. Osmond. Odie.
Oh, Asmund, yeah, Odie Asmund.
Odie Asmund was extorting her for the scalpels payment. But if the girl works in the morgue too, she would know they're not using 5,000 scalpels a month, so she would also be in on it.
Maybe the only person not in on it is Sholmes.
Is Iris.
Iris. Yeah, these two I trust. These two I will trust. Because even though he knows stuff, I don't think anything he's doing is malevolent or crazy. Oh, and of course Hisato. To me, she's the most trustworthy of everybody. Her and her books. Well, Gina too. I trust Gina.
Not Venus.
No. Gossip. So, okay. Well, we will go and play some more next time and see what else we find out.